After a stretch that tested the patience and belief of everyone inside that locker room, Baltimore finally delivered a performance that felt heavy, deliberate, and unmistakably physical. Coming off the painful divisional losses, the pressure was real, the margin for error was thin, and the atmosphere demanded a response that went beyond the scoreboard. What unfolded was not just a win, but a statement built on toughness, discipline, and an edge that had been missing for stretches of the season. From the moment the game settled into its rhythm, it became clear that Baltimore arrived intent on dictating terms, not reacting, not surviving, but imposing itself in a hostile environment against a rival whose season was hanging by a thread. The opening minutes were messy, the kind of football that makes you shift in your seat. Missed throws, dropped passes, stalled drives on both sides. It felt like momentum was floating in the air, waiting for someone to grab it. Cincinnati had opportunities early, moments where a single clean execution could have flipped the tone, but those chances slipped away. A drop here, a sack there, a drive that fizzled just before it could become dangerous. Baltimore did not immediately capitalize on those mistakes with points. But something more important happened. Confidence began to tilt. You could feel the Bengals getting frustrated, and you could sense Baltimore feeding off that frustration, growing louder, faster, and more aggressive snap after snap. Midway through the second quarter, the switch flipped. Baltimore's defense started arriving with bad intentions, hitting, swarming, and making every throw and every step uncomfortable. The hits were legal. The pressure was relentless. And the message was clear: nothing would come easy. That intensity spilled into the emotional side of the game, and Cincinnati clearly took issue with it. Tempers flared, shoving matches broke out, and suddenly the Bengals were playing angry instead of focused. That was exactly the environment Baltimore wanted. When a team loses emotional control, assignments break down, communication falters, and discipline disappears. Baltimore stayed locked in, playing through the chaos rather than getting swallowed by it. One defensive lineman in particular embodied that tone. He was everywhere, even when the stat sheet refused to tell the full story. Every time Cincinnati tried to settle in, there was pressure in the quarterback's face, collapsing pockets, forcing rush decisions. The impact was felt even without sacks piling up. Quarterback hits add up. They change how plays are called, how quickly reads are made, and how confident a passer feels standing in the pocket. By the time the game moved into the second half, Cincinnati's offense looked hesitant, second-guessing itself, and completely out of sync. What made this performance stand out was not just the physicality, but the collective buy-in. This was not one player freelancing or chasing highlights. This was 11 players moving as one, trusting that if they did their job, the rest would take care of itself. Gap discipline was sharp, coverage held up, tackles were finished. Even when the defense spent long stretches on the field, there was no visible drop-off in effort. Possession time favored Cincinnati heavily, yet yardage and points told a completely different story. Holding a dangerous offense scoreless is not an accident. It is the result of preparation, communication, and sustained intensity. There was also a psychological element that cannot be ignored. Baltimore sensed weakness and leaned into it. When a team realizes the opponent does not truly want the fight, the game changes. You see it in body language. You see it in the way players jog back to the huddle, in the way heads drop after another third down failure. Cincinnati entered the game knowing a loss would all but seal their fate, and instead of playing free, that pressure seemed to suffocate them. Baltimore, on the other hand, played like a team, with nothing to lose and everything to prove. That contrast grew sharper with every drive. The cold weather only amplified the divide. Baltimore embraced it, while Cincinnati appeared uncomfortable as the night wore on. Tackles became harder, collisions sounded louder, and the Ravens seemed to grow stronger with every series. Defensive backs challenged receivers at the line. Linebackers shot gaps without hesitation. The front seven hunted. This was the kind of defense that thrives when the game becomes ugly, when finesse takes a back seat to willpower. Offensively, Baltimore did not need to be spectacular. They needed to be efficient, protect the football, and let the defense control the pace. They did exactly that. No unnecessary risks, no panic when drives stalled. Field position mattered, time mattered, everything was calculated. And that patience paid off as Cincinnati continued to press, trying to force plays that simply were not there. Mistakes compounded, and frustration boiled over on the sideline. What made the shutout even more impressive was the context. This was not a depleted, directionless offense. This was a unit led by one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. surrounded by weapons capable of breaking a game open at any moment. Baltimore had been burned by this same opponent earlier in the season, in their own building, under similar circumstances. That memory lingered. It fueled the edge, the focus, and the refusal to let history repeat itself. This time, there would be no late collapse. No hanging on for dear life. This time, the door was slammed shut as the final minutes ticked away. The difference between the two teams was unmistakable. One sideline was energized, connected, feeding off each other's success. The other looked defeated, disconnected, and emotionally drained. This was not just about one game, it was about identity. Baltimore looked like a team rediscovering who it is supposed to be, playing the kind of football that defines them when they are at their best: physical defense, controlled offense, and a mindset that thrives on discomfort. And with that foundation reestablished, the conversation around this team starts to shift. Because performances like this tend to echo far beyond a single week. As dominant as the shutout looked on the surface, the deeper story sat beneath the box score, in the way Baltimore managed emotion, pressure, and momentum over the course of 4 quarters. This was a game that easily could have spiraled early, with mistakes on both sides threatening to turn it into a sloppy, unpredictable battle. Instead of letting frustration creep in, Baltimore absorbed the chaos and slowly bent the game in its favor. That ability to stay patient while still playing with an edge separated this performance from many of the uneven outings earlier in the season. One of the most telling aspects was how Baltimore handled the emotional spikes. There were moments where tempers flared, bodies piled up, and the tension between the teams was impossible to ignore. Cincinnati leaned into that anger, letting it distract from execution. Baltimore used it as fuel. Without crossing the line, that balance is difficult to achieve, especially in a divisional matchup with postseason implications hanging in the air. Playing on the edge without falling over it is a sign of maturity, and it showed in the way penalties were avoided. While the physical tone never softened, the defense, in particular, played with a sense of purpose that had been missing in recent weeks. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, no waiting to see what the offense would do. They dictated everything, even when they were on the field for extended stretches. There was a calm confidence in their communication. Adjustments were made on the fly. COVERAG East tightened, and pressure packages evolved as the game unfolded. Cincinnati tried to counter by speeding things up and leaning on quick throws. But even those options were contested, forcing the quarterback to rush decisions and abandon reads. What stood out was how impact did not always translate to traditional statistics. A defensive lineman can finish a game with only a couple of tackles and still completely wreck an offensive plan. Constant pressure forces quarterbacks to move off their spots, shortens routes, and eliminates downfield concepts before they can develop. That was exactly what happened. The pocket never felt safe. Every snap carried the threat of contact, and over time, that wears on even the most composed passers. By the 4th quarter, Cincinnati looked like a team just trying to survive the night. The shutout carried extra weight because of how this season has unfolded. There were stretches where Baltimore looked lost, emotionally flat, and disconnected from its own identity. Wins came, but they did not always feel convincing. Losses lingered longer than they should have. This performance felt like a reset, not because it magically fixed everything, but because it reminded everyone what this team can be when it commits fully to its principles. Defense first, physicality always, trust the system and trust each other. Offensively, the approach remained disciplined. There was no need to chase style points. Ball security mattered more than fireworks. Drives that ended without points still served a purpose by flipping field position and giving the defense room to breathe. That complementary football, where each side understands its role in the larger picture, is what championship-level teams rely on. Baltimore embraced that reality rather than fighting it. Another layer to this game was the contrast in urgency. Cincinnati entered knowing their margin was gone, that one more misstep could end everything. Instead of sharpening their focus, that pressure seemed to tighten their grip. Baltimore played looser, freer, yet more controlled. That paradox often defines teams that are comfortable in their skin. They understand who they are, what they do well, and they do not abandon it when adversity hits. The Ravens leaned into the cold, into the noise, and into the physical nature of the game, while the Bengals slowly faded. There were moments late where the outcome was no longer in doubt, yet the effort never dipped. Tackles were finished, routes were run with purpose. Communication remained sharp. That kind of consistency sends a message not just to the opponent, But to the rest of the league, it says that this team is not satisfied with simply getting by. It wants to dominate when given the opportunity, especially against divisional rivals who have caused problems in the past. Perhaps the most important takeaway was the emotional response after the final whistle. There was confidence, but not chaos, satisfaction, but not celebration that felt premature. It looked like a group that understood the job is far from finished, yet recognized the importance of reclaiming its identity. This was not about revenge or trash talk. It was about reestablishing standards, about reminding everyone inside that building what Ravens football is supposed to look like. When it is done the right way, the numbers will show a lopsided score and a rare shutout. But the real significance lies in how it happened. Physical domination without recklessness, emotional intensity without losing control, patience without passivity. When those elements align, this team becomes dangerous, especially as the season moves into its most unforgiving stretch. And with that foundation now visible again, the ripple effects of this performance are only beginning to surface. That renewed confidence was visible in the way Baltimore carried itself snap after snap, especially on defense, where communication and trust were evident even in chaotic moments. When Cincinnati tried to adjust with quicker throws and misdirection, the Ravens stayed patient, rallying to the ball and limiting any chance of yards after contact. It was not flashy, but it was suffocating. The kind of defense that slowly drains the life out of an opponent. Each stop reinforced the belief that nothing was going to come easy. And eventually that reality settled in on the other sideline. There was also a clear sense of accountability throughout the Ravens roster. During this stretch of the game, missed assignments were corrected immediately. Players picked each other up after tough snaps, and there was no visible finger pointing when something went wrong. That collective mindset matters late in the season. When pressure amplifies every mistake, Baltimore responded to adversity by tightening up, while Cincinnati seemed to unravel incrementally, struggling to regain footing once the game slipped out of reach. Moments like this have a way of defining how a team sees itself moving forward. This was not just about beating a division rival, but about rediscovering a standard of play that had been inconsistent earlier in the year. Baltimore showed that when it commits to physicality, discipline, and emotional control, it can dictate terms regardless of venue or circumstance. The challenge ahead will be carrying that edge into the next matchup, but the foundation was clearly reestablished on this night, with the Ravens playing the kind of football that demands respect across the league. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens. And hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. Whispers have been swirling around the Ravens locker room ever since news broke that one of their star players has decided to part ways with the team. While the details remain murky, the atmosphere in Baltimore has grown tense, with fans and insiders alike speculating on what could have prompted such a high-profile departure. The man at the center of the storm, head coach John Harbaugh, offered a brief, seemingly resigned comment when asked about the situation. "I can't do anything." He wanted to leave. His words, simple yet loaded with unspoken frustration, have only fueled the fire of speculation. Analysts and commentators are now dissecting every angle. Was it a clash of personalities, a contract dispute, or simply a desire for a fresh start elsewhere? Sources close to the team suggest that the star's decision was not sudden, hinting at months of private discussions that ultimately led to this dramatic exit. Meanwhile, the Ravens front office has remained tight-lipped, offering no official statement beyond Harbaugh's cryptic acknowledgement. The timing is curious, and naturally, the rumor mills are spinning wildly. Social media has erupted with fans expressing disbelief, disappointment, and in some corners, excitement about the possibility of seeing the star in a new uniform. Former teammates have been spotted giving subtle nods of support, though few are willing to speak publicly, choosing instead to let the rumor circulate unchecked. There's talk that this move could reshape the dynamics of the team, opening up opportunities for younger players to step into the spotlight, or leaving the Ravens scrambling to fill the void left behind. Despite the uncertainty, one thing is clear: this isn't just another routine roster change. When a player of this caliber walks away, the ripples are felt across the league. Everyone from rival coaches to sports agents is watching closely, eager to see where this star will land and how the Ravens will respond. As speculation grows, the only certainty is that the story is far from over, and the rumor mill isn't slowing down anytime soon. Harbaugh's brief comment may be the closest we get to an explanation for now, but insiders suggest that the full tale behind this departure could be even more dramatic than anyone realizes. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.